I just want to do God's will.
The kind of revolution that the world needs is a Christian revolution.
If you want a miracle, you've got to expect it to happen.
You are the recipients of God's grace and God's blessings, and you rejoice in that reality.
Welcome to Life Today Live. I'm Randy Robinson. All right, we're going to hit something that I wanted to talk about for a while now and try to really understand, because, you know, when COVID hit back in 2020, obviously things got a little crazy. And then, you know, you had President Trump pushing for a vaccine. And then all the vaccine stuff came out. And I had someone on this program telling me that it was the Christian thing to do to go get this vaccine, which wasn't technically a vaccine. It was a shot, you know, and then the mRNA stuff. And I'm talking to multiple doctors that I know, you know, my personal doctor, and they're saying you should probably wait given your medical history, because both my retinas have detached, and there was some early stuff. And it was just one big experiment on the world that I thought, you know, I'm going to opt out and I'm going to do what the Bongino rule, which is let's wait and see, right? Hat tip to Dan Bongino. But we're far enough out. I think we've got a little bit of data, but then there's also other issues around the idea of vaccines, which I've had them all, having traveled to South Sudan this year and Burundi last year and China in my life and Cambodia, all these places. Believe me, my yellow book, if you know what that is, it is full and it is current. So I'm not like an anti-vaxxer, but you hear, oh, vaccines are made from aborted babies. And you go, what? You know, I'm like, what is true? Well, I am excited to have someone that can help straighten some of this out for you and me today. There's a book called Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality. It looks just like this. It's available now wherever you get books. It's written by John Leake, and Dr. Peter McCullough. And many of you have seen Dr. McCullough for sure if you watch some of the news channels. And he's a pioneer in this area. So you got the medical, and then John's a great writer and researcher. And so John is joining us to talk about this and answer some of my questions and hopefully some of your questions. So this will be a fun one. John, welcome to Life Today Live. Good to have you today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Where to even begin? Maybe you open the book with what you call a powerful myth. Maybe we should start there. What is some of the mythology around vaccines that will help set the table for the rest of the discussion?
Well, I'm glad that your programming it touches on or even delves deeply into man's religious nature and our seeking of meaning in religion and a concept of God, because I think that if you go back to the beginning of the vaccine enterprise, and in the West, it really kicks off in the year 1721. In Boston, Massachusetts, which back then you'll recall was still an English colony, there was a smallpox outbreak in Boston, and there was this idea that had apparently originated in Central Asia. It went to England and the colonies by way of Constantinople. This idea that you could inoculate a healthy person with just a little bit of pus from a smallpox blister or a smallpox pustule, and just a little bit of, and they called it inoculum, just a little bit of infectious causing material from the blister. You make an incision on the healthy person's arm and you rub a little bit of this pus in the healthy person's arm. The idea that the observation is just a little bit of poison, and the infectious agent was not understood. This was long before the germ theory of medicine. It was just understood to be a contagious matter. That little bit of poison would protect the person, cause mild disease, a few blisters around the arm, but it would protect the person from severe smallpox. So that was the idea. It's an interesting observation. It's not totally without merit, but there was really no way to evaluate it in a scientific way. I would call it kind of a charming idea difficult to do with any kind of real rigor and difficult to evaluate with any rigor. But very, very quickly, you have this perception that we've got it, we've got the solution, we have the mechanism of protection. And it was quickly declared to be a beneficence from God, that God had conferred through the mind of man this technique of protecting against this scourge. And what I would say off the bat is this religious perception of vaccines as conferring protection. It extends throughout the entire 300-year history of the story. And if you look at the cover of the book, this is very interesting. That is a 20 euro silver coin that was issued by the Vatican in 2022. And it's commemorating the COVID-19 vaccine, the messenger RNA vaccine.
Yeah.
And you'll see that tripartite, the sort of trinity of figures, very common configuration in Catholic iconography. The Numista catalog, the coin catalog, describes this as a boy prepares to receive the vaccine, which is really the identical wording and syntax is a communicant prepares to receive the Eucharist.
Jeez.
And then on the obverse of the coin is Pope Francis's coat of arms, and he's saying the Holy Father is telling you this vaccine confers the protection that one would normally associate with God, with Jesus, or perhaps a saint, Saint Christopher, Saint Mary, that now it's the vaccine. And so you see this kind of archetypal religiosity throughout the whole thing. And you will notice in 2021, when they rolled it out, it was presented in this absolute way.
Yeah.
Everybody. Yeah. It's like, if you don't partake of the Holy Communion of the vaccine, you're unclean. You're a member of the reprobate.
Yeah.
And you will be cast out. You will be excommunicated. You can't go to work. You can't participate. And so if you're a professional athlete like Novak Djokovic, you can't compete.
Yeah.
So I think vaccines should be understood to have, some of them have some empirical scientific methods of evaluation, but a lot of the vaccine enterprise, I think, is better characterized as a cult or a secular religion.
Yeah.
And I'm not dismissing the basic concept altogether. It's not an anti-vax book. It's just a critical evaluation.
Yeah, I had never really tied that. I mean, literally had someone on the program saying, this is how you love your neighbor, because otherwise you're going to kill them, right, if you're not careful. And I thought, well, geez, that's a bit heavy. But yet at the same time, yeah, it does have a little bit of a cultish feel. But, and this is the root of a lot of occults, but the fear was thick. And I'm sure that was the case with smallpox. I mean, yellow fever, influenza, you name it. Anytime there's something slightly unknown and not fully understood that's killing vast amounts of people, yeah, fear's going to be a part of that. When you look back, because you go through, and we don't have time to go through all these various places where we have these vaccines, which most of us get. I mean, my grandson had to get before he even went to preschool, recently. It's like it's a part of our culture. It's part of our world. How do you, or do you even, evaluate the success overall of vaccines? Because they work, do they not? Most of them?
Some vaccines work for some people, achieving certain objectives. So, for example, let me just back up and give you a historical timeline. So, this kind of love affair begins in the 18th century. In the 19th century, with Louis Pasteur, in the mid 19th century, vaccines really start to take off. He became a very Pasteur in France became very celebrated with this post-exposure prophylaxis to rabies. It was a rabies vaccine, but it's actually, he administered it after the person was exposed to rabies, which is a very interesting chapter of the book. But then after Pasteur, at the beginning of the 20th century, you get this enormous enthusiasm for vaccines, and rolling them out and distributing them. But observe what's happening at the exact same time. Roughly between 1850 and 1948, when the vaccine schedule is introduced in the United States with the diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis shot, during that century, all of this enthusiasm is going on for vaccines, but at the same time, we have enormous advances in every living standard. I mean, you name it, there's an enormous advance. I'm talking about nutrition, the agriculture, fertilizer, the storage of food, the preservation of food.
Sure.
Ship channels, steam engines, all of these things that make food much more readily available. And, I want to emphasize this point. A well-nourished body is pretty robust.
Yeah.
If you start starving somebody and depriving him of vital nutrients, he becomes very susceptible to disease.
Yep.
We're all kind of fat nowadays, but back in the 19th and even in the early 20th century, people were hungry and they were undernourished. So sanitation, sewage treatment, clean water, chlorination of water, cleaning up the air. London fog, as it was called, the coal smoke in London was so thick that everybody already had a case of severe bronchitis going just from coal smoke. Never mind a viral or a bacterial respiratory illness. Everybody's already choking on coal smoke.
Yeah, that's true.
So it just goes on and on and on. So if you look at U.S. vital statistics, the published data, what you see in a nutshell is already by 1948, with the introduction of the first vaccine on the childhood schedule. It was recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics that all children get diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. So let's just stick with that shot. Already by 48, mortality from diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis had plummeted over 95% since the beginning of the 20th century. So, but now, you get to the end of the 20th century, kids that go to medical school, the general public, what is given credit for the steep decline of mortality? It's not sanitation, hygiene, nutrition, better housing, better ventilation. It's vaccines that get the credit. So I'm not saying that they don't deserve some credit, because they do confer some immunity. It's just that the attribution is far greater to vaccines than it is to all of these other things.
Yeah, it's interesting. Interesting observation, and that it makes sense. So, okay, a couple of questions, because I know they're the hot questions people want to know. Did vaccines come from stem cells from aborted fetuses?
Well, so that question goes to the rubella vaccine specifically. And there's some technical things with rubella that are not just, on the top of my head, or off the top of my head. I can't exactly rattle them off. Rubella, oftentimes called German measles, an extremely mild disease. It's sometimes called 3-day measles. You get this red rash. It kind of looks like regular measles. But it's just a very mild illness. The problem with rubella, and it is a problem, like we don't deny this, is that if pregnant women are infected with rubella, and I think the problem is largely during the latter part of the pregnancy, that infection can cause a syndrome in infants with pretty profound birth defects. And so the idea with the rubella was, we need to vaccinate women so that they don't get this congenital rubella syndrome when they're pregnant, which I think is a good idea because it is a bad syndrome. I mean, it's pretty devastating. Um, but the vaccine guys went one step further. They said it's not a perfect protection. So, at first glance, you would think, well, what about just giving the vaccine to women of childbearing age? And I mean, if it works, it's going to protect them from it, right? But the theory was, well, but a woman who's even a vaccinated pregnant woman, she could be exposed to a man at a Christmas party who has rubella, and if she's not perfectly protected, then she could get rubella, and it would be disastrous for the infant. So the idea was everyone needs to get the rubella vaccine in order to generate like really good herd immunity. So in other words, you're limiting the risk that the woman will ever even be exposed to it to begin with, never mind protected. So it was a guy named Stanley Plotnick and another guy named Leonard Heiflick at the Wistar Institute in Philadelphia, and they cultured the rubella vaccine, the virus for the vaccine, and I'm just quoting from our book, was cultured in the kidney cells of aborted fetuses donated by the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology of the Hospital of the University of Pennsylvania. The name RA2327/3 means rubella abortus, 27th fetus, third organ to be harvested, which happened to be the kidney. Now, according to the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, these same fetal cells obtained from the early 1960s have continued to grow in the laboratory. They're immortal cell lines and are used to make vaccines today. No further sources of fetal cells are needed to make these vaccines. So yes, the virus for the vaccine was cultured in the kidney cells of aborted fetuses in Philadelphia in the 60s. That is disconcerting to Christians. The good news is it's already done. It's already happened. I mean, make of that what you will.
Yeah.
But I believe it is an overstatement that this is an ongoing production.
Yeah. So in other words, if I go get a rubella shot or any of the other ones, I'm not contributing to the abortion industry in any way.
No, it's already done. So
Yeah.
it was done in the 1960s.
Yeah. Okay. And that was my understanding, and I know that's just one of the big questions. The vaccine again. It's not a vaccine, right? The COVID mRNA, at least mRNA one, I should say, is not technically a vaccine.
It's not a vaccine in the traditional conventional sense. So the word vaccine comes from there was an English physician and naturalist named Edward Jenner at the end of the 18th century, and he had heard stories in Gloucestershire, England, which has a large dairy industry, that dairy maids who contracted what was known colloquially as cowpox, it was smallpox-looking blisters that would occasionally erupt on the udders of dairy cattle. And the dairy maids who were milking the cattle would get these blisters on their hands. And the kind of farmer word for this was cowpox. Okay. So legend has it that these dairy maids who got cowpox, mild disease, few localized blisters on the hands and forearms, if they got cowpox and then smallpox came through town, say the next year or 5 years later, the story was those dairy maids did not get smallpox.
Inoculated.
So it would seem that cowpox infection protects against smallpox. So that's the idea. Jenner gets pretty revved up about this. He writes a pamphlet. He submits a pamphlet to the Royal Society. Interestingly enough, the Royal Society doesn't publish it. They say, you don't have enough evidence. So then Jenner publishes the pamphlet himself in London. Multiple editions of it, but he uses the Latin. He says this is an inquiry into the causes and the immunization against variola vacinae. And that literally means variola is the Latin word for smallpox. Yeah. Vacinae is Latin for of the cow.
Yeah, vaca.
Yeah. So a vaccine literally means of the cow. Yeah. And it derives from the name of Jenner's pamphlet. So the idea with a vaccine is a mild or an attenuated or an inactivated pathogen. Mm-hmm. Now, interestingly enough, this is fun. Jenner didn't know what the cause of smallpox or cowpox was. He actually uses the word virus, but this is important. The etymology is important. Jenner was using the old word virus in the Latin sense of the word, which literally means poison. Poison. So he didn't know what the poison was. He didn't know what the poison came from. The only observation was this poison seems to cause this contagious bug. Contagion coming from Latin to touch together. We don't know where this comes from. It just seems that if people or animals and people touch, then it's transferred from one organism to the other. But he didn't know what the hell a virus was.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So that's a vaccine. Attenuated or a inactivated, killed with formaldehyde, something like that, virus or bacterium. Okay. You come to COVID-19, and there were people who just cultured SARS-CoV-2, the causative agent. Interestingly enough, SARS-CoV-2 really doesn't culture very well in kidney tissue. So like with polio, it's monkey kidneys that are used as the culture medium. SARS-CoV-2 doesn't culture that well in monkey kidneys. So there are various immortal human cell lines and laboratories that were used to culture SARS-CoV-2, the causative agent of COVID-19. And there are some vaccines that are made out of just the inactivated virus. But what these guys in the United States and Germany were interested in is a technology called messenger RNA. And the idea there is you could genetically sequence the precise protein sequence of the virus. And then what they did was they took the segment of that sequence that is coding for the spike protein. It's the little spiky thing on the surface of the nucleocapsid. And using what's called a lipid nanoparticle, they injected this genetic code into the cells of the deltoid muscle, which then coded them or instructed them, the human cells, to produce this foreign protein. So it's quite something. I mean, like, yeah, we are literally going to instruct the cells of the human body to produce a foreign protein. Just to complete the kind of weirdness of this, the idea was that spike protein will then present to the human body's immune system, which will produce antibodies against that spike protein.
Right.
With those antibodies, and the theory is if the human is then subsequently infected with SARS-CoV-2, those antibodies will respond specifically to the spike protein on that virus. So why exactly they were so revved up about all of this is something that we explore in great detail in our book. But suffice to say, for various reasons that we explore, this really doesn't work. It was a charming idea, but the problem is A, it doesn't work, it doesn't prevent infection or transmission, and B, it's dangerous.
Oh,
So a total catastrophic failure, the
yeah.
greatest failure in modern medicine. A lot of people don't realize that because there's so much propaganda to obscure it. But that's the reality. And if anybody wants to debate me on it, happy to do it.
And I find it interesting because, again, my wait and see attitude has been that I watched, and I mean, I'm just one guy and I'm not a medical expert or anything like that, but I know I didn't get it. My wife didn't get it. I have those close to me who did. They all got COVID multiple times. And so didn't take long before I was like, well, it doesn't really work. I get the idea that it's in the sort of the spirit of a vaccine. So maybe it's not technically a vaccine, but it's doing the same thing. It's giving you a low dose of something, making your body fight the virus in that case. So I don't even get hung up on the terminology too much. But at the end of the day, I'm like, I don't think this is really working. Now, the counter argument would be, well, but if you do get it, it's a much milder case. And I'm wondering, and I don't know if you've kept up with this, but
Hang on, let me just interject. Let me just nib that one. It's just not true. That's just an assertion.
Okay, and that's my question. Do we know now
there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever of that. That's just an assertion.
Yeah. Well,
and there's so much fraud in the way this whole thing was rolled out. The way data was logged, and hospitals. I mean, these guys, the military, the intelligence agencies, the pharmaceutical companies, this was a fait accompli that this thing was. They already decided in the summer of 2020 that they're rolling with this thing. The U.S. Department of Defense issued a press release. We've already signed the contract to buy a gazillion doses of the stuff. It hadn't even been through clinical trials.
That was one of the reasons I waited. But I get it because it seemed like we needed something, and we needed it now. And President Trump was on board. So if you want to get political about it, I mean, he was fully, he was excited. He wanted to take all the credit for it, like he does everything. And then the Biden administration obviously kept pushing it and the weirdness with the penalties and a guy getting arrested for surfing during COVID while the governor's sitting unmasked at a restaurant with a bunch of his friends. It seemed like it just got to be a mess real fast. And I don't know that we've actually pinpointed all of the fallout, both on the medical side, even on the political side. I mean, a lot of people learned to not trust the news, which I thought was a great lesson. But I don't know, when you look back, just looking back over the last 5 years, where are we now as a culture in, I don't know, some of the ways that COVID impacted?
Well, let me just point out a few things that I think your audience will find helpful in trying to evaluate this. So the idea of messenger RNA vaccines, it arose because you go back to the influenza pandemics of 1957 and 1968. And the problem that was quickly discovered was that in order to make an influenza vaccine, which by the way also doesn't work, that's another surprise.
I know that one firsthand.
We explain why it doesn't. But these attempts to make an influenza vaccine. So the idea was, and in those days they couldn't do genetic sequencing. They would do serology sequencing. They would get a pretty good idea of the basic proteins of the virus, and then what they would do is they would culture the virus in the embryonated, the fertilized hen's eggs. Okay, so it's not just chicken hen eggs, it's fertilized chicken hen's eggs. The discovery in the 1930s was that you could culture influenza viruses in a fertilized hen's egg. The problem is this requires a ton of eggs, and it takes a lot of time. It's painstaking. So, pandemic strain of influenza emerges in Hong Kong or Singapore or wherever. And the idea is, well, let's try and quickly immunize the American people against it before it makes it to our shores or
Sure.
before the flu season in the fall.
Sure.
Problem is it takes too long. It's too painstaking. You've got to get all these hen houses and eggs, and it's just kind of a time-consuming thing. So that was called the flu vaccine gap. Like, we can't make enough vaccine for the general public fast enough to close the gap between it emerging in China and arriving on our shores. So the dream was, with this genetic technology, we could quickly sequence the RNA or the DNA of the virus, and then use messenger RNA technology to come up with an RNA shot like within a few weeks and immunize the public before the virus arrives on our shores. Now, obviously, this is pretty ambitious in the era of jet travel, right?
Right.
People can get over here pretty quick. But so that was the theory, but is typical of these people who aren't nearly as smart as they think they are, as they claim to be. The idea of closing the flu gap with COVID-19, the ship had already sailed. I mean, the virus was already very widely circulating in the American populace before this thing was rolled out with any real scale in early 21. So a huge percentage of the people who ran out to get the shot, they'd already had COVID-19 anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
They'd already been immunized against it because they'd already actually contracted the virus. There's no better vaccine than just getting the illness. I mean, the idea of a vaccine is if it's a really dangerous illness, then the vaccine could spare you of severe symptoms and illness. But if you've already gotten it anyway, the vaccine isn't going to do you any good.
Yeah, they weren't saying that.
Well, that was the biggest whopper lie of them all. It was like, really, guys? So this messenger RNA vaccine, which is inducing the production of one protein on the virus, that's better than actually getting the virus and mounting a full immune response to every protein on the virus? Are you kidding? Like this is like, and by the way, Santa Claus exists. Let's just make up stuff.
Yeah.
So the problem that we were up against is that the American people, and nor President Trump, had the medical or the virological or the vaccine background to realize that we were being hoodwinked. And Trump, whose great skill is his good instincts. I mean, he just kind of can read what's going on. He just kind of has this cunning and instinctive way of evaluating the world. These medical goons had him dead to rights with this COVID thing. He was out of his depth.
Yeah.
I mean, he's way out of his depth.
Oh, and the hard lesson of Dr. Fauci. All right. I won't take the time for that. I want to show people a couple of things. I want to show them your website real quick. This is author johnleake.com. He's got a new book out, actually, on a local thing here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And another one coming on, what did you call it? Mind Virus, coming out next February.
Mind Virus. Yeah. I realize I need to update my website. Mind Viruses, it's about all of these ideological contagions that we've had, transgender, climate change.
Can I get a vaccine against wokeism?
The last, it's funny, you kind of understand my metaphor with this book. The last chapter is stopping the spread of mind viruses.
Okay. I do want to let people know that you do address some things in the book. And if you can give us a short, I know these are deep topics, and so it's unfair to even ask you this, but you touch on autism.
Yeah.
And I think it's a legitimate question. Do we really know, is there a relationship between any certain vaccine or vaccines in general and autism? Because I hear yes, no, but yet the rates have climbed. I don't even know what to think about that.
Well, so I'm the vice president of the McCullough Foundation. We just came out with a comprehensive review of autism. And so, a couple of things. Autism has been deliberately characterized as autism spectrum disorder. Okay, now this is important. The word spectrum is being used in such a broad sense. I mean, it goes from profound autism, which is children who are completely disabled, will literally require round the clock care for the rest of their lives. I mean, total invalids, can't talk, bang their heads, hurt themselves, can't brush their teeth, can't go to the toilet without an escort. That's on one side of this so-called spectrum. The other side is some obsessive compulsive computer designer. So we're not autism spectrum disorder is a deliberate obfuscation of the problem. That's like saying cancer. Well, cancer is like 1,000 different things. What causes lung cancer is not the same thing that causes
Leukemia.
cancer of the lung caused by asbestos or leukemia
Yeah.
or prostate cancer or whatever. I mean, there are similarities, there are overlapping similarities, but it's different illnesses with different causes. Okay, so we believe, by far and away, the biggest risk factor of autism, particularly in children who had normal births, normal gestations,
Yeah.
met their developmental milestones during the first 12 to 20 months of life. And the timeline is very, very clear in thousands of cases. Mom and dad take them, or mom takes them to a baby wellness visit. They get a whole bunch of shots all together: measles, mumps, rubella, diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, chickenpox, you name it, a whole bunch of shots all together in this small baby, still developing its immune system, still developing its brain, its central nervous system. There is a certain percentage of infants that are susceptible to this developing a high fever accompanied with a seizure, or maybe a seizure without a fever, inconsolable crying, unable to sleep. That initial illness will then induce brain inflammation or encephalitis. When that fever and seizures and encephalitis are then subsequently gotten under control, you have this post encephalitis syndrome, i.e., otherwise known as brain damage. And that is what we are seeing in thousands of cases. And it's amazing how our modern medical profession will just impose propaganda. It's just, no, you didn't see that.
Yeah.
I mean, I have 1,000 witness testimonies from perfectly sober, alert, reasonable parents,
Right.
and they're pediatricians and child developmental psychologists will tell them, "Oh no, it wasn't caused by the vaccine." And the mom's like, "Well, what are you talking about? Like the child was normal. I got the vaccines. The baby developed a fever and a seizure that night and then regressed into autism. And you're telling me there's no causal connection?" It's just not true.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you talk about mind virus too, the sort of the gaslighting that goes on when people, we marginalize people who say what you just said, that I took my baby in and then this developed. And I get it. It's not everybody. So plenty of other good people are going, it didn't happen to us, so they must be crazy.
Correct. And not all children are susceptible to having this reaction.
Yeah, obviously.
But, what's really crazy about this is, rather than just saying, I mean, it's doubly crazy because in 1986, the vaccine manufacturers went to Congress and they said, okay, look, our vaccines are super safe and effective. You know, they've saved the American children from grave disease and mortality. So everybody needs to get one. But the vaccine companies themselves said they're not safe for all children. Some children, a small percentage, will have a severe adverse reaction that could result in severe injury or death. And we, the vaccine manufacturers, if we're going to provide this strategic public health asset, we can't be held liable for this little percentage of kids that are injured or killed. So the vaccine manufacturers themselves have already admitted that a
Yeah.
small percentage of children
Right.
will be injured by vaccines. I mean, they've already admitted it and they've asked for liability protection so that they won't have liability for it. So a lot of this is just absurd. And we'll tell you, I'll tell you something to your audience. The American people in this great republic of ours, we need to awaken to the fact that our government is very easily captured by powerful political and commercial interests.
Mhm.
And they really don't care about we the people. They don't. I know we would like to think that they do. They may, in some sort of sentimental way, without thinking about it too much, pay lip service, but they don't really. They're interested in their interests. So we as a people need to, as James Madison, the author of the Constitution, said, we must equip ourselves with information and understanding so that we can evaluate what our government tells us. We
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
just trust the government.
Yeah. Yeah. And that goes, I don't care who you vote for, and part of it, again, we don't always know, you know? And when you get money involved and power involved, you just, yeah. So, okay, to bring this all the way back around to, well, right there on the cover of the book where you've got your little Trinity thing, which I did not pick up on, but which, geez, I think maybe that would be my point of emphasis at the end of this entire discussion, which is, because when this thing hit, my parents are older, they're in their 80s now, and they were like, yeah, we don't know what to do. And I'm going to prayer about it because that's where I go first. And I felt like I should wait. Whether they made a difference or not, I don't know. My parents, they went and they got I think it was an mRNA shot. I don't think it was the J&J, but they went and they got something to protect themselves because they're in a high risk category just by default of age. My faith is in God. And I think at the end of the day, that's what I would stress is that whatever comes our way, wherever you're at, and whether you've got an infant who needs, the doctor's saying it's time to get your vaccines, you pray about all those decisions because you may be in that small percentage that it affects negatively. And I think God will protect you from that. If we put our faith, as the coin on the cover of that book has, in the scientists or in the government, in big pharma, God forbid, I think that's where we get in trouble. And so I would urge people, look, I'm not here to judge whether you got a shot or not. And I hope you don't judge me for my yellow fever update and all the stuff that I've had for my travels. I pray about all of them. And our faith has to be in something higher than a company, even a scientist, as smart as they are, and I know most of them are trying to do good, or in a politician, whether it's the one you voted for or the one you didn't vote for, right? I think you got to go back to that image of the Trinity and figure out that it's a God Trinity, not a man Trinity. That would be my bottom line. Where would you end?
In the Gospels, there's this famous, very interesting, endlessly fascinating scene where the devil, the opposer, tempts Jesus. And he says, well, I'm just, all right, if you're the son of God, just jump off the temple. Like, start doing all of these spectacular things to prove, make wine out of water, do all of this stuff. And the temptation is just show man that they don't have to worry about anything. They don't have to learn anything. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to exercise any free will. They don't have to be prudent. They don't even have to behave like adults. You will just take care of them, like completely, in the way that a father takes care of an infant. And Jesus rejects that. And look, I'm not a theologian, but this is my interpretation. What he's doing is he's saying, I'm not going to present myself in a way that just relieves everybody of all responsibility. You can't be a grown-up human being, and I don't think you can be a Christian if you just say, I'm an idiot, I have no responsibility, no prudence, no learning. I'm just going to rest assured that either God, without any effort on my part, or the state, or science, I think, so I hope I'm not being a blasphemer here. I mean, I think God wants us to cultivate our minds.
Yes.
To be responsible, to use our minds, and not just be lazy and defer to the state.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, in my sense of prayer is prayer is where you meditate on God, you ask him for guidance, but in that act of meditation, you're also contemplating the reality of your world and your responsibilities. Anyway, I hope I haven't offended anybody with my, my amateur attempts at apology.
Well, I'll back you up a bit, because Simon was considered the wisest man in the world because of the knowledge he had, not because he vacated all knowledge and just, trusted in we do trust in God to take care of us, but there is a responsibility that we have, and so I back you on that one for sure. And that's why I like these kinds of discussions. I'm sure we could find things we disagree on, whether it's medical or political or theological, but to have these healthy discussions, it forces us to think, and that's a good thing.
Well, I would prefer to see our people not just place blind faith in politicians like Anthony Fauci. I mean, they can listen to what he says, evaluate, seek second opinions. By the way, Dr. McCullough and I, we always told people, get a second opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't just accept the word of any man as the gospel.
Exactly.
No particular man is infallible. Fauci actually invoked the doctrine of papal infallibility. He said, those who attack me are, quite frankly, attacking science, because I am science.
Yeah, that was crazy. Crazy.
He's the incarnation of science.
Yeah.
So science is just a method of inquiry. It's not some final metaphysical property of all knowledge that just is incarnated in you. It's an ongoing inquiry.
Yeah, and as history has shown us, it's often wrong. But that's part of the learning process, so I get it. But it's often wrong, so let's keep that in mind. All right, I got to wrap this up. Appreciate you, John. I appreciate your insight and you're coming on and getting some detail on this. And for people that want to go further, obviously, go learn for yourself. Anyway, anything I leave out before I let you go?
Well, I've made it easy for you folks. We spent 5 years researching it. You don't have to take it on faith. The book is thoroughly cited. It has 291 research notes. But I have condensed it and served it for you on a silver platter.
Yes, thank you. Yes. And we do appreciate that. So yeah, go educate yourself, and God forbid you put your faith in science and science alone. There's something higher than science. That is the creator. Okay, so let's keep the order of things. Appreciate you guys being here. Hit share, and you stir up your neighbors and family and get them irritated. Go ahead and get vaccines. Mythology, ideology, and reality available now.